Oh, hey, Grandma. So, say hi to the camera, introduce
I'm
yourself.
Leona. I'm Bradley's great-grandmother. I'm 95 years old. I was born in Detroit in 1915, August 3rd. I was raised with a lovely family. I had a lovely youth, and I went to Temple Bethel, which is, of course, a Reformed temple, like like Wilshire Temple. It's exactly like a Wilshire Temple. And I was confirmed there. I never was bas mitzvahed, but I was confirmed there. Uh, my father was born in America. My grandfather was born in America. My father's father. And they never spoke Yiddish in the home. Or my father really only knew English. But my grandfather, even being an American, was quite religious. He used to pray every morning, wear tefillin, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
On your arms?
Yeah, tefillin.
Tefillin. And his grandmother was very religious. And when she died, my great-grandmother, they passed every synagogue in Indianapolis. They were raised in Indianapolis. And they passed every synagogue and stopped to say a prayer in front of every synagogue with my grandmother, my great-grandmother in the head, on the way to cemetery. She was very well known. The whole family were very well known in Indianapolis. Well, I'm thrilled that all my grandchildren were bar mitzvahed and bas mitzvahed, and in my heart, I have a very...
To when you got married with Carl, and then, when you had your own kids.
My mother used to bench left, and always fixed a Friday night dinner, but we never had any services or anything like that. And, but we always ate very fancy in the dining room. We had a beautiful dining room. And every Friday night we did have a fancy dinner in the dining room. My mother benched left first. But we never were an ultra-religious family. On Friday night when we visited Indianapolis, and we went very often, my father loved to see his family often. There were 10 children in his family. And when we went to Indianapolis, on Friday night was really a Shabbat dinner. My grandmother used to cook big pots of food because there were 10 kids, When some got married, they joined too. And this big table was huge. And we all sat at the one table, and my grandfather had the stacks of dishes in front of him. I'll never forget it. And he had a tureen of soup, and he would dish out the soup. And when the food came, my grandmother would bring these big platters of food to the table. My grandfather dished out for everyone. And it had to be quiet at the table. My grandfather was not very strict in any way, but when he wanted his Friday night dinner, he wanted it quiet at the table. And my father was a comedian, and he never was quiet. Ask him. So I called my grandfather, and he was so sweet, but he says, "Honey, it's Shabbat. My children are home with me on Shabbat." And I said, "Okay, Grandpa, never peep." I had Babe, that was my cousin's name, take me home to my grandfather's. He was very strict about his family at the table on Friday night. When they were married, they had to come with their spouses. And if there were children, they had to bring the children. But it was a happy Shabbat, lots of love at the table. My father's father was something else. He really was. What I'm trying to say, when I first married my husband and I went to Chicago to meet his sisters and brothers and his aunts and all, they spoke Yiddish. And in our home, we never spoke Jewish. So the first time I went, his Aunt Goldie was talking to me in Jewish, and I didn't understand a word she said. And she said to her nephew, my husband, did you marry a Gentile girl? He says, no, Aunt Goldie. He called her always Aunt Goldie. He says, she's Jewish. Well, a year later, when I went home, I always marketed in the kosher butcher. And that's where I learned Jewish, at the butcher shop. I'd ask different people words that were in there, and they would tell me in Yiddish what the words were. So when we went back to Chicago, and my husband took me to see his Aunt Goldie, I walked in and she spoke to me in Yiddish, and I answered her in Yiddish. Well, she grabbed me and she kissed me. She was so thrilled. At last she feels her nephew married a Jewish girl. Sure, very strict. When in the years that he went, and he missed one, if they didn't follow the Hebrew words right, the teacher used to have her 12-inch ruler. Grandpa told me this. And they would hit him on the knuckles. They really hit him on the knuckles.
Are you at public school?
Grandpa could read Hebrew beautifully till the day he died. When we went to services, he always did the Hebrew part.
Oscar went to public school.
He was very good in Hebrew. He read the Hebrew. I didn't know a word of Hebrew because of my temple. In the years that I went, it was very ultra reformed, and our rabbi didn't even wear a yarmulke. He wore Dr. Frank. He was called Dr. Franklin. He did not even wear a yarmulke. But now it's different. They wear taluses and they wear yarmulkes. They've sort of gone back